EV road trips are almost invariably an unmitigated disaster from start to finish. You have to plan your journey according to where the chargers are. You hope that when you get there they actually work and they're not all occupied. And you have to download an app, create an account and log in. And then you have to wait possibly hours while the damn thing charges up. But at least you can be happy that your trip will be cheaper than if you'd just taken a regular petrol or diesel car, right? Well, actually maybe not, because a recent real-world test between a petrol car and an EV has revealed not only was the EV trip slower and more painful, but also more expensive. If you're after EV and net zero sanity, you've come to the right place. Welcome to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney YouTuber. If you like my videos and content, please be sure to like, share and subscribe, hit the notification bell and drop a comment down below. You may have seen my recent video, link up here, about the Fox business journalist travelling from Chicago to New York in a Tesla, and how relaxing and stress-free that was. Now Australian website Car Expert has pitted two top-of-the-range BMWs against each other for the short hop from Melbourne to Sydney. Short by Australian standards, that is, it was 900 kilometres, but still a fairly regular trip for many people. The luxury 740i Petrol costs a staggering 272,000 Aussie dollars. But the top-of-the-range EV, the i7 M70, costs an absolutely eye-watering 344,000. So this isn't necessarily a comparison which will impact many of us, but they were essentially equivalent in ICE and EV guises. You can read the full story at the link in the description, but suffice it to say, it was a complete nightmare for the EV. The range overestimated on the trip out of Melbourne, meaning it arrived at the first stop with just 2% of the battery left. There was also a cell phone outage that day, which meant that some chargers were out of action, as everything is done through a plethora of different charging apps. If you don't have cell phone coverage, you can't charge up. And when you drive an EV, you have to start worrying about stuff that regular drivers never even have to consider, like hills and the wind direction, as the article explains. The drive from Hawthorn to Tarcutta saw a net elevation change. That means while we started closer to sea level, we ended up around 200 metres above sea level. During our drive, the vehicle was predominantly climbing as opposed to descending. These are factors the car isn't aware of when you charge it to full. Instead, it tells you what it could theoretically do if the conditions matched its WLTP test cycle. Taking the car outside those parameters with highway driving, elevation changes or weather will ultimately affect range. And while you may use more juice climbing a hill, you can hope and pray for some of it back on the other side. Between Sutton Forest and Sydney, we're able to actually get around 20 kilowatt hours of free energy plumbed back into the battery, thanks to the predominantly downhill drive. This is where you'll see the vehicle's range either increase, stay static, or decrease very slowly. Given we started at or near sea level in Melbourne and ended up at sea level again in Sydney, you can see that the first part of our trip from Melbourne to Tarcutta is where our battery use was around 20% higher due to the elevation change. But as we got closer to Sydney, it went in the opposite direction, and we added getting free charge. In reality, this is the extra battery we used earlier in the trip due to the elevation change. However, you never get all of that energy back going downhill that you use going up. So there's still going to be a net loss from this. And headwinds also have a significant impact on range. So make sure you get your windsock out before you set off. The result of this test was that the EV used just over 200 kilowatt hours of electricity for the journey, and the ICE car used just over 56 litres, which worked out cheaper than the cost of the electricity. And this was before a recent hike in the cost of some Australian charging providers. A follow-up article chronicled the trip back, link also in the description, which highlighted the difficulties that can be faced trying to even get a charger to work when battling with apps and online services. The charger simply wouldn't accept the card. We tried various versions of plugging in the car, tapping the card, pressing buttons, shouting at it, pleading with it, but nothing worked. Thankfully, the app did work, even if it was a paid charge rather than a free one. The time was now 4:45 p.m. We had arrived shortly after 4. After downloading the ChargeFox app, Igor set up a profile, then added a credit card, then found the charger and selected it. He followed the prompts to connect the car and we were in business, until we weren't. Turns out that charger wasn't connecting, so we switched back to the other fast charger and repeated the steps. Success! Yay! The i7 was refilling its battery and we would be back on the road in about 30 minutes. Wow, finally. How annoying that would be with a family in the back. And you also have to provide loads of personal data like home address and credit card details, for example, before you can connect and charge up. In all the years people have been putting petrol in their cars, it's never been a requirement to register your personal information with a petrol station. So why do you have to do that to charge your electric car at a public charger? Why can't you just pull up to a fast charger, tap your card and charge? Or better yet, charge, walk into a building and pay a cashier, then drive away. I know this is a radical idea, but surely it can't be that hard to implement. Absolutely right, but the reason for this is that charging stations are woefully uneconomical. You can check out my earlier video up here to see why. There's no budget to employ actual people to process transactions, as the throughput of vehicles is a fraction of that at a regular fuel station. And profit margins are already tiny, so you have to automate everything with smartphone apps and touchscreens, which not only makes it clunky and cumbersome, but much more prone to faults and outages. And the ultimate irony is that, at the end of the day, it's more expensive as well. The fundamental problem with all of this is that the physics of charging speeds and grid supply costs means that you can either have slow charging, long waits and cheap, or fast charging, shorter waits and expensive. You just can't have both. Well, that's it for this video. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Drop a comment down below and let me know what you think. If you have any tips or stories, you can hit me up on Instagram or by email. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye for now.